One of my favorite questions to ask people is, what's your favorite cartoon? And as a follow-up, what about your favorite cartoon TV station? Not only because the extreme variety of answers you might get back, but the way someone can legit light up when talking about a show that lives in the center of their nostalgia. For me, when I was growing up, my eyes were firmly locked on Cartoon Network here in the US. I didn't even know about Nickelodeon and the Disney Channel until I was like 9 years old. So from 1995 to 2004-ish, when I was in front of a TV, I was in the world of Dexter's Lab, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, Billy and Mandy. My still to this day most favorite cartoon of all time, Ed, Ed and Eddie. Like, that channel never changed from early morning to late night. And of course, as longtime watchers of Cartoon Network know, as the sun went down and the freaks came out, the programming on CN would shift, going from the usual over-the-top cartoons to the late-night primetime hours. The two separate programming blocks, Toonami and Adult Swim, kicking on and welcoming teenagers to young adults. And kids like me who just didn't change the channel. With some much more mature shows. Things that, when I was growing up, felt like I wasn't even supposed to know about. Cartoons that said cuss words, had sexual themes, and were obviously not for kids despite my 9-year-old ass loving shit like Home Movies, C-Lab 2021, The Brack Show, Aqua Teen, all of these early bangers. But beside Adult Swim in those evening hours, both sometimes leading into those shows and other times being mixed right in with them, was Toonami, the legendary anime block from Cartoon Network that, no exaggeration, changed the worldwide landscape of anime forever. I did a brief summary in my Space Dandy video from years ago that talked more about Toonami's massive influence, but when I was a young dumb kid watching late night TV, I still remember seeing things like Yu Yu Hakusho, Inuyasha, Gundam, weird cartoons that looked old as hell because I had no idea what anime as a concept was. These shows regularly having cuss words, having actual death and real violence. Girls in outfits that altered my brain and had me looking like a cartoon wolf. This shit felt unlike anything in the world to me so far, and I was not alone. And of course, there was one show at the dead center of this explosive wave. The show that changed the mental chemistry of not only the people watching, but largely the entire world itself. Of course, you already know it's Dragon Ball Z, the foundational anime from Toei Studios that was adapting the just as legendary manga by the same name. Well, minus a Z. It being created, drawn, and taken to the stars by the late great icon himself, Akira Toriyama. And today, if you can't tell from the length of this video, we're taking a deep dive into all of it. And what do I mean by that? Well, we got the manga, both of the anime, there's GT. We have years and years and years of fan content. Long lists of movies, video games, spin-off manga, and of course, we have the modern day continuation of the franchise, both in animated and drawn form. So today, let's take a long-ass trip down the infinite snake way that is the legacy of Dragon Ball. Starting first with the guy behind the pen, the man who seemingly accidentally changed the world, Toriyama himself. So, for the basic backstory, Toriyama had always been, well, himself. He was a nerd, he was goofy as hell, he loved sex jokes and dumb gags, silly faces and wacky character designs. He was shy, he was a bit of a perfectionist, but more than anything I think, He really loved to draw. He loved art as a concept. He said in interviews how important both 101 Dalmatians and Astro Boy were to him as artistic influences. And despite him having to struggle through shitty jobs while submitting one-shots to monthly magazine competitions, he never lost that love for art itself. He would always stay drawing, sometimes out of spite, and kept trying to find that character, that story, the one readers would latch onto. And in 1980, he did with Dr. Slump. As I'm sure a lot of you already know, Dr. Slump was the story of the invincible, super strong robo-girl with bad eyesight, named Arale, living in Penguin Village with her inventor Senbei and getting into weekly gag-type adventures. I'm not gonna go too deep into Slump here because I already got a lot to say about other things, but as both a gag manga and Toriyama's first major series, Dr. Slump whips ass. It's legit funny, and Arale is a fantastic main character. Tons of the same reasons why Goku is so enjoyable can be traced back to her. And more than anything, it finally let Toriyama work consistently on a manga to both grow his skills and also just flex them to the world at large. But we'll talk more about that style shortly. At about 18 volumes in, Toriyama was ready to move on and wanted to end the series, to which the Jump higher up said, okay, but you gotta come up with a replacement. Tori hitting the drawing board and pumping out one-shots to gauge reader interest along with his weekly releases of Dr. Slump. Some doing solid and some just kinda passing by. As of now, a lot of both these one-shots and his earlier pre-Slump stories can be found in the hardcover Akira Toriyama Manga Theater, a really solid collection of his short stories. Viz has printed it in English and you can find it pretty much anywhere. Now at this point, Tori's first major editor, Kazuhiko Torishima, after talking with his wife, recommended maybe he draw a martial arts focused story, seeing as how Toriyama was a huge kung fu movie fan. And with that, the Dragon Boy one-shot was released, it having a way less adorable main character with dragon wings instead of a tail, but following the same basic structure that would go on to make Dragon Ball. Toriyama dropping 2 chapters of this Dragon Boy story that seemed to be well enough received, reworking major aspects and adding in elements from one of his favorite novels, Journey to the West. Dr. Slump ending in September of 1984 with a note to prepare soon for the release of Toriyama's next series. And just 2 months later, Chapter 1 of Dragon Ball was dropped on November 20th. Running in Weekly Shonen Jump for over 10 years and ending on May 23rd of 1995, literally right around when I was born, getting 42 total volumes. And it kinda goes without saying, but across these 10 years and with the support of 2 stellar anime backing it, Dragon Ball would go on to become, well, motherfucking Dragon Ball, the anime that changed the world forever. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take it one step at a time and rewind back to the 80s, starting somewhere in the mountains with a silly but strong monkey boy named Goku and a resourceful but self-centered teenage girl named Bulma. Oh, and saying it now, I grew up on the dub, so you can just expect the dub names to be used. Sorry, that's just how it is. Lastly, hashtag gimme ya energy and like, comment, subscribe. My jobless ass needs your support on this movie-length deep dive. Let's go. Opening on a sunny afternoon deep in the forest, we are introduced to the tiny, adorable, and shockingly tough Son Goku, a boy with a tail who lives alone in a house tucked away from modern society. Goku himself basically being half boy, half wild animal. And one day as he goes around doing his usual routines, chopping firewood and hunting down dinner, the queen bitch herself rides up on Goku's house, Bulma Briefs, heiress to the world famous Capsule Corporation. known for making tons of high-tech science and daily living tools, all condensed into easily transportable capsules. After a goofy misunderstanding due to Goku literally having never seen a girl in his entire life, Bulma tells him that she's on a world quest for something called the Dragon Balls, ancient orbs with stars numbered 1 through 7 on them. A document she found, stating that if you collect all 7, a legendary mythical dragon will appear to grant you any one wish. And Goku's got the 4-star ball somewhere in his house, Bulma grabbing it by force and Goku calling it his grandpa. Turns out, Goku was found in the woods as a baby, an old man named Gohan finding him and raising the wild child. And one night while he was sleeping in the house with Gohan, a giant beast-like ape attacked them, killing Grandpa Gohan and leaving Goku all alone. The boy raising himself from here and treating this 4-star Dragon Ball, a treasure belonging to his passed on grandpa, as his grandpa itself kinda. Bulma setting him straight and asking if he wants to tag along for her adventure, mainly just tricking Goku so he'd give the ball up, as well as the fact that he is pretty strong and she could always use the protection. The duo setting out and starting a world-spanning adventure to look for these Dragon Balls, meeting new friends like Oolong, Chi-Chi, and the Turtle Hermit Master Roshi, taking on villains of the week like Carrot Master or Yamcha back when he was a desert bandit. But more than anything, these first chapters really set up this weird and interesting world that Dragon Ball takes place in. Outside of things like Monkey Boy Goku himself, there's talking dinosaurs, lion bandits wearing big metal armor, mob boss rabbits, talking pigs that can transform into whatever the hell they want. The way buildings, cars, all of the details that make the world up have this rounded, small, and kind of just cute design sense. Like going back and looking at the contemporaries with it in Jump, there was nothing else like it both during its time and kind of still now. Being based on Journey to the West, a Chinese myth, the style and world itself are drawn with a massive 1980s Chinese Maoist vibe, Oolong's red star hat and fatigues being like one of my most favorite designs in the whole series. And mixing that really traditional style with Toriyama's weird world of talking animals, capsule buildings, and rounded cars, it makes for one of the most interesting things about the early series. And lastly, Goku is legit just one of the best Shonen Jump protagonists of all time. Like, duh, this isn't new information. But a lot of the modern focus falls over to the adult Super Saiyan Goku, and while that still rules, he's great. There's a charm to Kid Goku in both his innocence and total silliness that makes Dragon Ball what it is, that helps take the coming fight scenes and amplify them to higher levels than its peers because Goku himself is the one doing it. Someone who from chapter 1 in 1984 to this day in 2024 is still easily one of the most lovable main characters ever put to page. This early adventure arc caps off with the dipshit Emperor Pilaf and his lackeys Mai and Shu taking the Dragon Balls and challenging Goku and the crew, the battle ending with the big reveal that when Goku looks up at a full moon, he becomes the great ape that killed Grandpa Gohan. And due to him losing his memories of each transformation, he totally forgot that he did it, becoming a big mindless monkey and destroying anything around him. Also, you can't forget, Pilaf makes his move, summons Shenlong or Shenron, and goes to make his wish, before Oolong shouts out that he wants some panties and a pair floats down from the sky onto his head. The balls turning to stone, rising into the sky and blasting off into separate directions to lay dormant for an entire year, unable to be used again until the stone fades away. Now, after the wasted wish and Goku finally passing out, the crew's adventure is kinda wrapped up. Bulma, who originally only wanted to wish for a boyfriend, is now dating Yamcha and no longer gives a shit about the balls. She's already rich, so what's it matter? With this, the crew breaks apart, and honestly, Toriyama could have wrapped up the series right here. But ratings were kinda poor for these early chapters, and his editor wanted to try and address those complaints rather than stopping. Toriyama choosing to focus more on the martial arts aspect now, and sending Goku to train with Master Roshi in the Turtle Hermit School, bringing in Goku's future best friend, Krillin. And from this point on, the course of Dragon Ball and, the world itself would completely shift forever. So, while I think the Pilaf arc is totally fine, it's got fun action, good gags, and the art is just enjoyable to flow between. It's obviously very different from what Dragon Ball was about to become. And now, with the shift into actual combat training, Toriyama was able to show off an aspect to his art that, until this point, no one really had any idea he was capable of. That being the fact that his ability to choreograph and lay out combat scenes between tons of different characters with unique moves and body types was unlike anything else in Shonen Jump, and largely manga in general. The next major arc is the 21st World Martial Arts Tournament. It straight up being full of one-on-one battles between both goofy fighters and real-ass hitters. And when you compare this arc and the way it was handling combat progression to the other Big Jump titles running beside it, there was just something different here. On one hand, you had Fist of the North Star, Kenshiro famously being the unstoppable tank of a man who can give you one solid tap and blow your head off. Absolute power fantasy fulfillment at its max. And on the other hand, you had Saint Seiya, the warriors of Athena attacking their enemies with moves that largely overall are very metaphysical in concept. Like half the cast just holds their arm out forward and dope ass art surrounds them while the enemy gets blown away over and over. Now, real shit, I love both of these manga and have no issues with that presentation at all. But when you look at these pages that were between their weekly chapters in Jump and see what Toriyama was laying down over in these tournament fights, it was, in the nicest way possible, an absolute step up from anyone else in the magazine. Each battle that either Goku, Krillin, Yamcha, whoever got involved with was a total spectacle to read. The movement of the punches, the swooping arc of the kicks, the defending moves and counterattacks. You can step by step, beat for beat, see the flow in your head. Like, the idea of reading this in the 80s is fucking wild to me. You'd be used to big battle-ending punches and weird shonen power attacks. Then out of nowhere, the goofy boy who 30 chapters ago was just wandering around the mountains has powered up in a way that both feels earned and logical, getting into battles that almost seem like frames of animation from how second to second they are with action and reaction. The overall style just being the definition of simple but infinitely effective. Still able to keep his sense of comedy and gags firmly in place as well. Krillin winning his match against Big Shit Smell because he has no nose is 10 out of 10 writing, I don't give a shit. One of my favorite things in any of his major fights is how Toriyama can use his ability to make great facial reactions, usually for gags, and turn them around to be the face someone makes when they get the shit kicked out of them, or later down the line, obliterated in a wave of energy. Like the distorted head, the bulging eyes, there's just something so unique to it. I love this. Speaking of energy, even this early in the story, Goku and Jackie Chun have a big-ass Kamehameha beam struggle. So to me, when people complain about the fights becoming too large-scale later on, The fact that this was here well before those aspects kinda clues you in that Toriyama always had those ideas floating around, and going forward would be using them much more consistently. It's with this arc right here where the legend really begins in my eyes. And when Toriyama's editor, the higher-ups and Jump fans at large saw what he was able to do with combat, the series would forever change to, no matter what, revolve around conflict between characters who were gonna fight it out with some of the most fluid and fun action ever published in Jump. From these chapters forward, Dragon Ball would shift back and forth between adventure-style stories that Toriyama demanded to do, and massive martial arts battles, him blending the two together during the Red Ribbon arc to have things like Muscle Tower, a 4 floors of death style arc where each floor has a different boss for Goku to defeat, like dumbass Ninja Murasaki or Robo Arnold Schwarzenegger. You also have the underwater pirate base where the gang finds both buried treasure and a weird alien looking robot. Or one of my favorite little arcs in the anime especially, Goku wandering into Penguin Village, meeting Arale and her smacking General Blue into the sky. I know this part of the story isn't everyone's favorite, but the Red Ribbon chapters were a really fun way to keep that mix of comedic adventure and combat progression into the story. And just when it could start to maybe get stale, we're introduced to Mercenary Tao, the contract hitman hired by Red Ribbon, and the dude straight up almost killing Goku, forcing him to get even stronger than before by climbing Korin's tower, powering up and heading back down for revenge. Now, in my opinion, Mercenary Tao being the first real-ass killer villain Goku meets still sends out shockwaves to this day. And yeah, sure, Goku comes right back and flexes on his ass, but that was the first time we saw Goku get his shit rocked so easily. Like, Jackie Chun beat him at the tournament, but it was close, it was barely a win. So Goku snapping back at him makes for such a huge pop-off that leads right into him straight up storming a military base, taking an entire army down, a moment that absolutely inspired artists for years to come. Think about how many series have the protagonist storm the base and took on hundreds of troops by himself trope now. Well, guess what, baby? Here's the genesis. And to be fair, you could say Dragon Ball invented like 60% of modern shonen tropes, which isn't a bad thing at all. I see people all the time read manga and go, this character just got a power up, yet another shonen trope. This series must be copying Dragon Ball / Naruto / Bleach Leisai. And like, man, tropes aren't a bad thing. Just evaluate the show or manga in front of you and have fun. Why's everything gotta be compared to everything? Anyway, after that, you have the short arc with Baba as Goku goes looking for a missing Dragon Ball. And despite this arc kind of feeling so lower scale compared to what we just did and what's coming up, once again, it's a perfect mix of that goofy comedy Toriyama loves, but also ending with a dope as hell fight between Goku and the ghost of Grandpa Gohan, being both super raw and super sweet. A perfect example of how Dragon Ball can be when it's at its best. Wrapping up here and going directly into another tournament, which is even better than the first. Goku being a few years older now and having matches against both Krillin, his brother in training, and the newly introduced freaks, Tenshinhan and Shiatsu, them being disciples of Mercenary Tao, vowing revenge on Goku in the tournament for killing him, and up to this point, creating some of not only the best combat scenes in the manga, but probably Jump as a whole. Both Goku vs Krillin and Goku vs Tien are some of the strongest fights in the series still to this day. Perfect blowout brawls that mix both martial arts mastery and the rising power levels the characters had been growing into. The ki blasts and special techniques ramping up with each new encounter. Like, remember when Tien could just grow 4 arms? Remember how the tri-beam fired in a perfect square somehow? Absolutely love the end of Goku versus Tien, them just falling from space, seeing who hits the ground first, and Goku slamming into a car and then the dirt. Our boy is still not allowed to win. The tournament itself ending with the straight up murder of Krillin. This new twist immediately leading into the final arc of the original story, the return of Demon King Piccolo. So I think it kinda goes without saying, but with the death of Krillin and the introduction to a big bad evil, Dragon Ball had become a very different manga from the pseudo-gag martial arts adventure series it started as. And regardless of what anyone else at the time thought, sales were picking up. Ratings were just getting higher. And now we as readers had seen Goku go from that silly no-worries kid in the mountains to a hardened warrior that, while still keeping his childlike happiness, has straight up killed villains and is on a quest for revenge over a murdered friend. And despite it already having changed at certain points, it's with this arc going forward, Dragon Ball would stay on that new path forever. The adventure aspect of the series kind of falling to the wayside, and instead, the martial arts fighting getting much larger in scale. I mean shit, Goku is fighting literal demons now, them both blasting huge ki energy along with complicated hand-to-hand attacks that can shatter buildings with ease. Piccolo gathering the Dragon Balls and wishing for his youth back. And then straight up blowing Shenron away with a blast, meaning that the balls are useless now.
No, they aren't.
And they can never be used to revive Krillin.
Yes, they can.
And of course, that moment of Goku arriving on the scene after his next big power-up and blowing down Tambourine is still probably one of the hardest moments in the entire manga. Like, this is something Goku keeps on doing as the series goes, but it almost never hits the same as this shot right here. And now, as I'm sure you know, the two have their massive blowout battle. Goku Kamehameha blasting his way through Piccolo's chest, him spitting out an egg that would later go on to hatch and create the Piccolo that we know and love. The final few chapters skipping far ahead by 3 more years and introducing Teen Goku. Probably my favorite Goku design, honestly. Him largely keeping a lot of those same aspects as Kid Goku with the round face and slimmer body, but now being an almost adult and having that 10 out of 10 personality. And after the phenomenal blowout battle that is Goku vs Piccolo Jr., Volume 16 ends with Goku finally winning his first tournament after back-to-back amazing matches, and the story kind of feeling like it's about to end. Getting a nice little flashback of all these moments and Goku riding into the distance with Chi-Chi to get married, and this ending lasted for about a week. Obviously, this is where the famous split between Dragon Ball and Z begins, which in Japan doesn't really exist, it just goes to volume 17. And this name change for the manga was done here in America to help push it next to a certain anime that we'll talk about here soon. Now, there's always been theories of why Dragon Ball began to shift the way it did. Some say editors stepping in, some say fan demands. But at least in Toriyama's own words, he had already begun to form the ideas of Piccolo being an alien, Goku being a Saiyan, and Frieza being a villain. Obviously with plenty of things to fill in between those gaps. And despite it almost feeling like the series could end here at volume 16, it never was meant to stop, and Toriyama just felt like this was kind of a way to celebrate the first major part of his story before beginning the second half. Jumping ahead 5 years into the future and, unknowingly to Tori, starting the saga that would be a catalyst for the world-changing wave that was Dragon Ball Z. Wasting no time after the defeat of Piccolo Jr., the very next chapter drops the pod from space being piloted by a character who's here to fuck with the war forever. The long, spiky-haired Raditz. Him blasting off across Earth in search of a person named Kakarot. And who am I kidding? This isn't early Dragon Ball anymore. You all know the story, it's motherfucking Goku's brother. The warrior from an alien race called the Saiyans, here on Earth to retrieve his brother and fulfill the goal all Saiyan kids are assigned at birth. Take over the planet your baby pod landed on and prepare that planet to be sold for cash. The Saiyan race basically being militaristic space pirates who are addicted to fighting, changing the entire framing of who Goku has been the whole time. Like, no shit, he was so strong. Of course he became a big monkey. He's a whole ass alien. The estranged brother kidnapping Goku's 4-year-old son Gohan, named after his grandpa, and says, "Come join me or else I kill the kid and blow up this planet." Goku teaming up with Piccolo to tag team Raditz and defeat him with the special beam cannon, killing both Raditz and Goku while sending a signal to the 2 remaining Saiyans out in space to get your asses to Earth. Goku going to Otherworld for training and the remaining Z fighters now preparing for a coming invasion 1 year later. So, obviously, going back to Demon King Piccolo, the story had already changed into a whole new type of manga. One that was combat focused, one that put more time into big villains instead of new monsters each week. But at its core, that innocence of Dragon Ball was still there somewhere. Now, with this time skip and big alien origin reveal, Goku himself actually dying and beginning a year-long training arc, the series can never go back to what it was. And while the scale before was ramping up and following a fairly logical pace, it's with the Saiyan saga that Z would go on to change the whole manga world again. It focusing now on non-stop balls to the wall hyper-fighting action. The cast all being able to fly and launch massive energy attacks that can destroy whole mountain ranges with total ease. The newly arrived Saiyan warriors using their scouters to gauge power levels of the cast, putting an actual number on their strength. A thing that, despite literally not mattering at all shortly after a certain point, ended up pretty much creating what would go on to be modern day power scalers. That's history, baby. This is a progression that would just keep growing with each new saga in the story. And from this point, I want to briefly cover the 4 main arcs of Z, how they build off of each other, and largely how Toriyama himself changes so much over the next few years. Starting now with the massive showdown between the Saiyans having landed on Earth, the big-ass bald-headed Nappa and the short but vicious Vegeta, prince of the dead Saiyan race. Upon their arrival and them rocking the Z-Fighter shit, within just a few chapters, they have killed Yamcha, Tien, Chaozu, and Piccolo, before Goku is even able to enter the battle. Having spent almost a year in Otherworld training with King Kai, Goku does what he did in the Demon King arc and will forever keep doing going forward, showing up just at the last second to totally destroy a lesser enemy. Be it Tambourine, Nappa, the Ginyu Force, you get it. The real meat and potatoes here is the first big match between Goku and Vegeta, the Saiyan rivals who obviously go on to become the biggest frenemies ever. Toriyama taking every single lesson he's learned up to this point and creating a non-stop brutal beatdown that feels like it grows more over the top with each page, starting on foot with that trademark hand-to-hand combat, raising into the sky as the energy beams begin to blast, Goku using his brand new special move with the Spirit Bomb, and Vegeta becoming a great ape to not only break Goku's body with ease, it also makes our main character finally realize that He was the one who killed Grandpa Gohan all those years ago. He was the monster that took the life of the person who raised him. Unfortunately, the story really never does anything with this aspect going forward, one of many such cases. Finally, skipping ahead a bit after everyone involved is either dead or close to it, Krillin is able to grab Yajirobe's sword, it being left behind after he sliced Vegeta's tail off, and makes his move to finish the evil Saiyan and save their planet, when Goku stops him, and to everyone's surprise, says, "Don't, let him go. One day he might get stronger and I wanna fight him again." Krillin throwing the sword down, Vegeta crawling into the pod and blasting off like Team Rocket back to space. Rewinding to early Dragon Ball, it's always been obvious that Goku loves to fight. Whether it was Yamcha in the desert or Jackie Chun in the tournament, Goku always got that spark in his eye whenever it came to training, to combat, to pushing his limits. Even if it was never a major focus of what his character was doing in the story, it has always been there. Now, here with him asking to spare Vegeta literally just so they can fight again, that trait really plants itself as becoming one of his core personality points, along with eating food, and it would go on to affect every major battle Goku will have going forward, be it against Frieza, Cell, Majin Vegeta, or Buu, the next arc starting right away and the crew blasting off to planet Namek, original home of Demon King Piccolo and the Namekian race. Them on the hunt for another planet's Dragon Balls and hope that they can revive the dead Z fighters that Vegeta and Nappa's onslaught took out. This next chunk of the story removing Goku for a while to instead focus on the supporting cast, namely Gohan, Krillin, and of course, Vegeta. So, the Frieza saga is probably the most famous arc in Z, and for really good reason, because real shit, the Frieza fight and its lengthy buildup feels like the perfect culmination point of Dragon Ball so far, of Goku's journey and his growth both as a character and as a warrior. The arc itself is split into two halves almost. The first chunk where the weaker fighters are using guerrilla-style moves on Frieza's army to both help the Namekians and steal Dragon Balls, while elsewhere on the planet, Vegeta does the same, except with, brute force, capping with the arrival of the Ginyu Force and Goku's landing on the planet, before the second half where Frieza himself steps into combat and begins his volumes-long battle with the cast, transforming into his multiple freak designs and peaking with what looks like, in my opinion, the perfect Z enemy. Going back to Toriyama's art in early Dragon Ball, it's always been full of both fluidity, all while having its own totally unique style. And now, all of these years later in the Z chapters, that style has developed into something that's both familiar while being so different. The original rounded designs are still at the core of the characters' frames, but their edges, their overall line work, it's becoming much straighter, more boxy you could say. Likely being something that helped Toriyama draw combat easier as the techniques got wild and the hand-to-hand fighting shifted from consistent back and forths to huge flurry attacks, multiple hit combos, and speed that was faster than light. So I totally understand this overall change, and I don't think it looks bad at all. Culminating here with Final Form Frieza, looking like an evil blend of both his old style and the new wave, all topped off with this shitbag personality that has endured the test of time, being probably the best Z villain still to this day from a writing and progression standpoint. Like, he's not even my favorite personally, but it's Frieza, come on! Their fight in the manga being a non-stop roller coaster of amazing combat. Like this scene of Frieza refusing to use his arms, going legs and tail only, but can only last a few pages before losing his edge and punching Goku, which in turn only makes our hero laugh at him. Dude, that's the good shit. Of course, the biggest moment of this fight, the thing that sends the Frieza saga into legend, pretty much changing shonen manga forever. Krillin is killed once again, just like before with Tambourine in OG Dragon Ball, meaning that due to Shenron's rules at this point, he can never be revived. Krillin, theoretically, is dead forever. Goku's best friend, his training partner, sending him into a blind rage, becoming angrier than he's ever been. That rage filling his Saiyan body and blasting his hair straight upward, the black fading to yellow and Goku achieving the level of Super Saiyan. The first of many transformations that change everything forever. The powered up Goku losing his cool and showing no signs of the former happy-go-lucky protag we've grown up with. Him now being the warrior of a dead race here to destroy the monster who took not only his heritage from him, but now his best friend. Beating the dog shit out of Frieza and reaching a level of cockiness that Goku has never had. Taking beam blasts to the face and just smirking them off. Now, even though I'm obviously saving anime talk for later, I'd be stupid not to just outright mention here, the anime takes this moment and elevates it to heights you'd not think possible if you had read it first. In the manga, it's literally just a page flip and bam, he's saying, here comes the beatdown. Still cool, sure. But in the anime, bro, it's a whole ass spectacle. The music, the sound effects, the extreme screaming of both dubbed and subbed actors, the emphasis on destructive energy that was being generated from Goku's rage. Yeah, no, this shit right here is probably the real reason Super Saiyan became the battle cry of kids, and basic blueprint for most shonen manga over generations to come. But we'll get more into that later. Lastly, even as Goku is beat down Frieza, letting him get cut in half by his own Destructo Disc, Goku still gives him a chance to be better. That kind-hearted protagonist coming back out, transferring his energy to the half-bodied asshole and letting him live, which of course is a wasted chance by Frieza, trying instead to attack Goku and him having to blast his ass away for good. But deeper than that, it's this panel here where Goku genuinely looks upset that he killed Frieza that's always really stuck with me. By this point, Goku has killed plenty of enemies, so this isn't anything new, but it almost seems like Goku, same with Vegeta, maybe wanted to fight the Space Warlord one more time. I mean shit, this has been his greatest battle yet, and unfortunately had no choice but to finish him off. All of that strength and talent Frieza had being a waste. Also, I doubt Goku likes killing, like he's just a warrior that isn't gonna let himself or others die if he can help it. So I'm sure that he never wanted this outcome, but it is what it is and Frieza had to go. The planet Namek exploding and Toriyama, now having written all of the major ideas he had cooking, changed his approach to writing Dragon Ball, and from here, story developments would happen weekly with much less long-form planning. The cast now back on Earth to begin a new duo arc, the Android Saga and the Cell Saga. Following the explosion of Namek and a little bit of time passing, Goku is lost in space. And meanwhile here on Earth, the crew has picked up a weird energy, one that's both menacing and familiar. And like Palpatine himself, somehow Frieza has returned, being half robot and hiding behind his dad, King Cold. Goku not here to help the crew deal with this returning threat. That's when it happens. The Drink himself steps in. And just like with the Super Saiyan reveal a few chapters ago, Toriyama casually changes the whole manga game again from here forward, introducing Future Trunks, the fan favorite badass with silver hair, a big ass sword, and somehow the ability to go Super Saiyan just like Goku. Him whipping out the blade and slicing down Frieza and his dad with total ease, ki blasting the bits into dust and immediately becoming one of the coolest dudes in the series, going on to change the story structure of Dragon Ball forever by bringing in time travel. Trunks being the son of Vegeta and Bulma from the future, here to help Goku and the crew stop the coming attacks. A pair of unstoppable android warriors are on the way, them being the remnants of the failed Red Ribbon army that still want revenge on Goku for his kid adventures. And he's also here to help Goku with his incoming heart disease that will straight up kill him if not treated. Now, famously, after Toriyama introduced the villains of the arc, Androids 19 and 20, he was called up by his former editor that was now the president of V-Jump, who said, "Really? An old man and a fatso? That's the enemies?" Basically asking Toriyama to introduce someone else, to which you get 16, 17, and 18. That same editor coming back and saying, "Two punk brats? Really?" Meaning Toriyama again had to create another villain, the bug freak from the future, Cell. Except his current editor said, "Bro, he is ugly, make him transform," leading to Toriyama creating Form 2. The editor now saying, "Doesn't he look a bit like a moron? Hurry up and make him into his perfect form." And finally, Perfect Cell is made. Now, despite me overall really loving both the androids and Cell, I feel like these short-lived and quickly made decisions, mixed with the introduction of things like time travel, are a little indicative of the growing overall quote-unquote issues with Dragon Ball Z. The biggest being, the plot feels like it's written very short form and kinda not really thinking about lasting effects down the road. Like I had said, Toriyama was developing the story weekly now, and figuring out where to go as he went, which can totally be done and make for good stuff. This isn't the first time he's wrote himself out of a hole with a random idea, like Goku just brain scanning Krillin's mind for the plot of Namek that he missed and never doing that again. Toriyama does not care to just toss some shit in there. But it also means that the lore changes are frequent. Power levels are all over the place. And the most unfortunate thing, large chunks of the cast are no longer able to do anything against the superpowered enemies. And all major fights happening between just 4 main characters: Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, and Piccolo to a lesser extent. Hell, even Future Trunks kind of falls off after his introduction, despite how cool and impactful he was. My most favorite of these random moments that comes about because of this writing is Cell being in a pod that was just under Jiro's lab the whole time. They had this whole big battle explosive moment in there, and oh, right over there was Cell, don't worry about it. And on Jiro himself, Bulma straight up says, "Can't we just go find him now before he does this evil shit in a few years and prevent it?" To which everyone says, "Fuck no, Bulma, that's not cool." Smart thinking, guys, good going, 10 out of 10. There are still some fantastic fights in these chapters, Piccolo vs 17 being one of the overall highlights of Z. Toriyama still showing that despite how hyper these battles have become, hard-ass punches mixed with smart technical thinking still means just as much as a massive ki blast. Of course, the Cell saga ends with the Cell Games, the buff Bugman creating an arena and challenging the world to come fight him. And if no one can win, bye-bye Earth! leading into a massive two-part battle between Goku and Cell, then Gohan and Cell. The father-son duo having trained in the time chamber to get the skills they need for this fight. All along, Toriyama planting the seeds of possible future ideas. So, despite the fight itself being one of the best ones in the whole manga, the battle between Goku and Cell ultimately ends with him and King Kai blowing up. And the real major focus here at the end of this arc is on Gohan, the half Saiyan, half human who's been forced into fighting since he was like 4 years old. Gohan, opposite of his battle-hungry dad, isn't really a violent person. Throughout the manga, he's consistently had explosions that hinted at his deep power still locked inside, that buried Saiyan lineage. But when that power isn't blasting out, Gohan is shy. He's quiet. He's kind of a mama's boy that wants to be a scholar when he grows up. And overall, he's just a normal kid who happens to come from a family of warrior alien freaks. And Toriyama was very obviously setting the climax of the Cell Saga up to bring those traits to the front, and to make the son who didn't want to fight be the only one who can. Him achieving a level beyond Super Saiyan 2, and mopping the floor with Cell, ending the arc at the cost of Goku's life. Real shit, I've been a Gohan fanboy since I was like 9 because of this arc. Like, I can't tell you how this shit impacted me when I was in, like, elementary school. And here I am at 29, still loving him just as much as I did then. Even if being his biggest fan is sometimes full of suffering. From here, jumping ahead 7 more years to the final arc of the series, we start the ever-controversial Majin Buu saga. The story now focusing on its new main character since Goku chose to stay dead, high school-aged Gohan. So, not sure if this is a hot take or what, but for my money, the early Buu saga has always been a personal favorite of mine. Gohan, like I said, is in high school now, trying to keep a low-key profile while also doing some Super Sentai masked hero shit on the side. Running around fighting crime as the Great Saiyaman. Vegeta lives with Bulma and the now 8-year-old Trunks, always locked in on training as usual. Krillin married Android 18 and had a kid, which when I was like 9 made me jealous as hell because everyone knows that 18 was and still is best girl. And my favorite new addition, Goten, is here. So Goku must have got it in with Chi-Chi right before the Cell games, meaning that he's been dead throughout Goten's whole life. The kid already able to go Super Saiyan and training with his older brother and best friend Trunks. God, I love this dumbass duo so much. This slice of life chunk of the story, Gohan meeting Videl and being a local superhero, the family dynamics of this cast I've come to love, them all trying to be normal as possible people, despite having the power to destroy entire cities. And now, with the announcement that the World Martial Arts Tournament is finally returning, everyone decides to enter for the big prize money, and not just a living, Goku, using the same 24-hour pass that Grandpa Gohan had back in Baba's tournament, gets to come home for a whole day, joining the matches along with the gang. Which, yeah, we don't get too much of that tournament in general, but I really love the chapters with Goten and Trunks in the youth division. Their match is that exact silly but insane level of DBZ combat that makes my soul just feel nice and warm. Of course, this chill vibe is busted up by the arrival of this lil grinning freak, him being the Supreme Kai, the Lord of Lords, who at this point in the lore is the highest ranked being in the universe, him having tracked Gohan and crew down to recruit their help in stopping the resurrection of an ancient evil being, something created by a dead wizard named Bibidi, and now being brought back to life by his son, Babidi, the unstoppable monster called Majin Buu. A big ol' fat pink thing with both a childlike sense of humor and very short temper, combined with seemingly endless strength and a weirdly elastic body. The big dude slapping the piss out of the whole cast and bouncing off to go have fun across the earth. His idea of fun being to destroy cities, turning people into candy and eating them. You know, just general terrifying mayhem done by a cute silly pink ball of fun that's impossible to hate. Yeah, real shit, I love Fat Boo so much. He's easily my favorite Z villain. Like, it's a perfect mix of the silly humor Toriyama loves that had unfortunately long left the series, as well as intimidating, overpowering strength that no one could seemingly stop. A true-ass Dragon Ball Z enemy. And with all of these pieces in play, the story progresses at a very breakneck pace. Toriyama riding by the seat of his dick, coming up with new ideas on the fly and moving past them just as quickly. Things like Super Saiyan 3, the newest long-haired evolution of Saiyan power-ups. The funniest one objectively because right after Toriyama introduced it, he immediately went, fuck drawing this, and had Goku say, that form is actually useless and dumb. Kinda just like the super buff Vegeta and Trunks modes from the Cell Saga. Speaking of Vegeta, Majin Vegeta is one of the ideas that I think overall, more so than Boo or anything else here, needed a bit more work. Vegeta has come a long way since his Saiyan arc introduction, remaining a constant antagonistic anti-hero that, even if he's been helping the team over and over, never really tries or wants to be friendly with them, always instead going out of his way to prove that he can one-up the other fighters, Goku especially. On Namek, despite him coming around to help stop Frieza with the crew, he still willingly killed innocent Namekians just to fulfill selfish goals. In the Cell Saga, he infamously did the dumbest shit and let Cell reach his perfect form because he knew it was gonna be a dope fight, risking the world and possibly universe itself when he was steps from winning and letting Cell live. So here and now, 7 years later after all this time of peace, Vegeta is presented with an opportunity to get stronger, to return to the roots of evil Saiyan power and willingly letting Babidi power him up. Those violent instincts taking a hold also he could fight Goku at full strength. The Saiyan that no matter what, he just can't defeat. The Earthling who hurt his pride all of those years ago, casually blowing up the World Tournament crowd just to antagonize his rival. Vegeta almost, in a way, desperately looking for the confidence, that validation he lost in himself years ago, defeated by Goku, Frieza, and Cell. Unfortunately in the manga, this moment between him and Goku goes by really fast, and despite some great shots of their fight, it almost ends just as quick as it starts before Vegeta goes on to make his noble sacrifice. I do love this moment for Vegeta, and I think him losing his ability to reason with himself because of his Saiyan instincts is great. And it is for sure a big unforgettable moment when he willingly murders a whole crowd of people just to be a dick. But I wish that this overall aspect was just explored more. It's so fast that, despite him getting a nice moment here with Trunks, he dies before Toriyama could really explore his character any deeper for the rest of the series. And lastly, there's the final two pillars of the Boo saga. One being the concept of fusion, and the other being the many forms of Boo. With Toriyama on his third editor by this point and in what he knew was the final arc, it seemed he was free to be a lot looser with things, able to bring back his goofy elements from all those years ago with things like the Great Saiyaman, Boo, and of course, Gotenks. When I was a kid watching Z, Fusion and Gotenks together were like the golden grails of Z. I mean, to dumb kid brain who's so focused on power levels, Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks is one of the coolest things you could probably ever create. only topped of course by Vegito just a few chapters later. The Gotenks stuff is just straight up dumb fun, dude. Toriyama reusing fusion panels over and over, cracking a joke that he doesn't have to be paid for these pages. But then using this new ability to have Gotenks whip Boo's ass with things like the volleyball assault or the kamikaze ghost soldiers. It being just some straight up Looney Tunes level antics but with Z power scaling. And dude, I adore this so much. Toriyama was still just as funny, still able to come up with new and interesting ideas on the fly and work them in with the Hyper Z fighting. And Gotenks is the perfect proof of that. Even if he is kind of the potential man of Dragon Ball, real Fushiguro energy, always don't worry, he might win and never does. Now, to skip ahead a bit over the legit non-stop plot developments, I haven't even mentioned Gohan training with the Kais to become the ultimate warrior, him returning to Earth and having one of the most memorable entrances in the series, only to immediately lose and get absorbed by Boo. Being a Gohan fan is forever suffering. Anyway, the climax of this arc hits with Kid Buu fighting Goku and Vegeta in Otherworld, the Earth having been blown up by one of Buu's big blasts. Goku doing a universal-wide spirit bomb and completely obliterating Buu. The final chapter and epilogue jumping 10 years ahead into the future and introducing Oob, the reincarnation of Kid Buu, who's a good guy now. Goku taking him under his wing and Dragon Ball ending at volume 42, the duo heading off on a new adventure, Goku leaving his family behind once again. I know I've skipped over a lot of the plot details throughout, but I figure most of you know Z like the back of your hand and you don't need another video just reciting a Wikipedia page to you. This was more so overall just to give you my thoughts on the plot. So, all of that said, Dragon Ball is a roller coaster of a manga. Its style, tone, and almost every aspect about it has at one point to another completely shifted into something different or totally new, exploring territory that manga had never really done before as we watched Goku grow from an innocent child to father and savior of Earth time and time again. It's got a story that can get lost in itself sometimes, but the fighting itself is so amazing from start to finish that it was never really an issue, constantly flexing his ability to create some of the most memorable battles in Jump and also manga in general, lasting still to this day. It's no exaggeration to say that, all things considered for the time it was releasing, Dragon Ball was truly special, going on to inspire almost every major manga artist from this point on in one way or another. Of course, despite the manga being a certified legend in Japan, there's another aspect to the series that, in some ways, is possibly more influential than the manga itself. The thing that changed the lives of probably millions across the world. You already know, it's the Toei-produced anime adaptations of both Dragon Ball and the follow-up Z. And here is where the real revolution begins. Starting in February of 1986 on Fuji TV, fans were reintroduced into the world of Dragon Ball, the now infinitely iconic anime by Toei being one of the most legendary TV shows of all time. It for sure creating the widespread fame across the world much more than just the manga alone. The original Dragon Ball series running for 153 total episodes, and following up its conclusion of the Demon King Piccolo arc in April of 1989, the very next week, Dragon Ball Z would begin. The studio switching lead producers at the request of Torishima, Toriyama's editor. Him feeling that while the general style and vibe of Tokizo Tsuchiya, the guy who had also done the adaptation of Dr. Slump, matched the energy of Dragon Ball's chapters to fit the anime really well, having that signature rounded and overall just cute design sense from both the characters to the world itself. But with the new genesis of combat the series was about to focus on, it needed an anime to match that more serious tone. Toei bringing on team members like Takao Koyama, Naotoshi Shida, Tadayoshi Yamamuro, the lead director Daisuke Nishio still being a holdover from the later half of Dragon Ball OG's team, now also working on Z as well. And before I start just reciting online Wikipedia pages, like I have already said in tons of videos, I love anime, but I'm an idiot about animation and the subtle differences between shit like key artists, or how this episode's production was different from another's. When I'm watching anime, especially one that's adapting a manga, I just kinda go on vibes more than anything else. How it takes that source material and brings it into its own thing for better or worse. And let's be real, there's about 1 billion videos on this website dedicated to just the animation team, so feel free to check out these ones, they're all great. Later, after this video, not now, later. For me and my retrospective, I want to talk more about the thing that, especially with Dragon Ball, I think matters the most. That being how these anime, both Ball and Z, completely understood not only what made the manga so good, but in tons of places elevated those pages to whole new heights. I had already said earlier how the Super Saiyan moment changed history forever in its animated form, largely because of how it took a cool but simple moment from the manga and turned it into an unforgettable scene that is burned into the eyes of third graders forever. And this exact energy, this elevation of specific moments, the total understanding of what at its core made both Dragon Ball cool, and how to take those things and somehow make them even cooler, creating the legend it still is to this day. Going back to the original anime with its softer style, there is a constant vibe of lighthearted fun and adventure. These bright colors, the fantastic translation of Toriyama's goofy sense of humor, and weird-ass world design. Also, of course, the way it was able to take those fight scenes between the cast, the thing that ended up propelling Dragon Ball and Toriyama himself into world fame, and create some of the most well-drawn, expertly choreographed, and impactful action in any anime still to this day. Toei and the team able to capture that exact mix of adventure and action just like the manga did, and especially in the 80s, creating a TV show that was unlike anything else right beside it on other channels. Like, despite what comes later on, these martial arts tournament matches, the fights where Goku would take on a arc villain in some other anime, but then just dicks around on them while making goofy faces and laughing, playing with his tail and then beating them into the ground. These will forever be some of my most favorite animated battles in anything of all time. And this was an energy that continued into Z. And even with the staff change, the understanding of the series they were making never went away. Z, obviously, is famous for its non-stop levels of combat, both in good and bad ways sometimes, but always holding a level of fun and charm to it that I really don't know if any other similar anime could ever duplicate. Hell, it's famous for having filler, something I would never say about most of Naruto's filler or any of Bleach's. And I can't lie, it's pretty worth it. Now, on another note, and in the same sense of the deep dives on animators and all that, the voice acting, both subbed and dubbed, as well as the production of the OSTs, both English and Japanese, have probably just as many deep dives and breakdowns on here. So for my thoughts, I love literally all of it. Subbed with the original Kikuchi OST, banger. Funimation dub with the Falconer mix, 10 out of 10. A combination of both, peak fiction. And yeah, I know the dub infamously rewrites parts of the dialogue and straight up gets things wrong, but I don't care, it's fun, and I grew up with it, so you can't stop me. I will say, I do hate the online conversation around Masako Nozawa, the original Japanese voice for Goku, Gohan, and Goten. I'm just really tired of seeing the screaming grandma bad criticism. Shut up, loser, it rules, and she's been carrying this franchise on her back longer than most of you have been alive. Nothing wrong with having a subbed or dubbed preference, obviously. Just no reason to shit talk one of the actors because you don't personally like them that much. As I've been putting together this video, I've been looking online at promotional images for the anime. And while I'll always love Toriyama's art, man, the staff at Toei just fucking get it. They know what young to teenage boys are gonna go monkey mode at. And both then and right now, these promo images speak to my soul. And when it comes to that same style of marketing, that's not to mention the timeless Toonami adverts with the dopest editing. And of course, the random inspirational speeches. These are all absolutely on YouTube right now. Go watch them and return to a happier place. And like, yeah, sure, not every part of Z is perfect. Not every frame of animation is drawn at its best. There's some god-awful pacing at times. But you legit can't even get me to act like I care about this at the end of the day. I'm sorry. Also, Kai exists. It's basically just a recut version of the anime to be more paced like the manga, removing most of the filler and getting a whole new dub. As far as I can tell, it's your own personal preference on if you'd rather watch the original. It's your personal preference on if you'd rather watch the original or Kai. I've only ever seen the OG, so you can go watch these videos to see how fucked up the Buu Saga release was apparently. One of the biggest staples in the anime, both Ball and Z, is the long list of movies and OVAs that were produced pretty much yearly during the anime's run, to a varying degree of quality. And I've seen them all, so here it is, the movie tier list, including the ones made years down the road and supers as well. I actually had a whole few page segment here where I kinda ranked each movie individually, but that added like 30 extra minutes to the video and I had to cut that down. Here's the outline if you want to pause and read it. But as it stands, this list does reflect how I feel overall about the Dragon Ball movies as a whole. Some are awful like The Return of Cooler. Some are great like Lord Slug or Fusion Reborn. And then you have one like Broly, which is honestly, I think, the best out of all of them and one of the most recent. But overall, I think a lot of them are just fine at best and boring at worst. The one thing I will throw out about dub versus sub here is that I love the dubs of these movies so much. Like, I'm sure a lot of you have already seen the Super Android 13 clips.
Don't you lecture me with your $30 haircut. Goku dies. We'll see, you red ribbon redneck.
But the realest shit ever was them adding in Stupefy by Disturbed to Lord Slug and Change by Deftones to Cooler's Revenge. Funimation was literally making officially produced AMVs, and to a lot of us dipshits in the early 2000s, that was like crack being pumped directly into our hearts. Also, where the power levels planted the seeds of power scaling years ago, it was with the introduction of Broly that it exploded into a modern-day online war zone. Kids and teachers forever arguing online about who could beat who based on the most paper-thin logic, or biggest fanboy emotions ever. Honestly, most of these can barely even be considered movies. Like, they're largely all under an hour long and are more so just OVAs or specials marketed as big budget productions. Toei was mainly much more concerned about just getting them out yearly to cash in on the series' popularity, rather than worrying about the end quality. But we still do got tons of gold in there. Huge aspects of them would go on to affect Dragon Ball as a series forever. Characters like Broly and Cooler having the same level of fame as Cell or Frieza. And regardless of any bad ratings I may have given, all of these are a massive part of either my or someone else's childhood. So if you want to give shit-ass Return of Cooler and S, go ahead dude, I get it. Now, all of these things said about the anime, its quality, the filler, whatever, the real fact of the matter, the truth that was spreading across the world, is that, yo, this show is the coolest thing ever. Dragon Ball Z specifically was being broadcast across multiple TV networks in multiple different countries, getting localized dubs and airing on primetime cartoon stations. Kids everywhere tuning in, and something deep inside of all of us just clicked. In the random sea of cartoons, out of nowhere was this pure injection of raw adrenaline brought on by these extremely buff and badass dudes, them getting into some of the coolest fights ever animated, all sandwiched between shows like Dexter's Lab and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, or late at night between Reign the Conqueror and Cowboy Bebop. And to both young boys and girls in the late 90s to early 2000s, still in the peak of extreme over-the-top in-your-face media, this was like uncut cocaine hitting the streets. School hallways, online forums, local anime club meetups. The world was ablaze with Dragon Ball. It was on everyone's mind. Those earlier mentioned promo images being posted everywhere and being one of the coolest things that you had ever seen back in like 2001. Growing up, I had so many DBZ toys, the ones with big energy balls in the hands that you could press to light them up. I had a shitty bootleg Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta I found online from like China, I think. Endless amounts of Gokus, Gohans, Vegetas, you name it. I even had that dumbass Buu Saga Krillin that came with a gun. Things in 2024 are way different than how they used to be, but living and growing up in both inner city Louisville, Kentucky and deep rural South missionary Baptist country was obviously two forms of separate culture shock. But there was two things that I clearly remember being shared between them. In Louisville, anime was dumb nerd cartoon shit, and down in the South, it meant you were a freak who liked that Japanese porn stuff. So I just literally never talked about either. I saw too many people get clowned on to even throw my thoughts out there. It took until I was like a senior in high school to even admit to myself that I really did love anime. But anyway, back in that era, there was a universal agreement, the unspoken rule, that being, nah, Dragon Ball Z doesn't count. And I am dead serious. I remember so many times when anime would get shit on, someone would bring Dragon Ball Z up and it turned into a dignified council meeting. No more slander was thrown. Most kids just agreed back then that even if you didn't give a fuck about anime, Goku was on a level that characters like Naruto and Ichigo sure were not. Now, to get a bit introspective for a second, one thing I've talked about on this channel before is I had a colorful childhood. My parents were 16 and 17 respectively when they had me, and were both still pretty much dumb kids from my formative years, so I was kinda shuffled around from place to place, spending lots of times with different grandparents while the craziness of that life just happened around me. And one of the biggest things that helped disassociate it, the thing that blocked out those shitty parts from my world and made life a lot more tolerable, was media. TV and games. All of these things that could help me forget about that terrible shit going on outside my room and just have some fun. With the show that was the brightest beacon of them all, the power fantasy that helped me feel that even if that shit sucked, as long as I beefed the fuck up and got stronger, I could take it. I could counter it. Of course, being DBZ. There's a reason I love Gohan so much, and it's largely because seeing him, that timid kid hiding behind Goku, go all the way to defeating Cell with his own strength was so cathartic for me. An overly anxious kid who was terrified of the world. But watching the Z crew blast through their problems with raw power and amazing action, it was a really solid rock I needed to hold me down during some dark times. And the thing is, I am far from alone here. I really do think that this was an experience tons of people just like me had with Dragon Ball Z. It was an escape. It told us we had reasons to fight. And even if this was something that Toriyama never really intended, I'll fucking die forever grateful to him for this. But all of that aside, with the ending of both manga and anime, Toriyama himself having no plans to do anything else Dragon Ball related, going on to create Sandland, Neko Majin, all kinds of short stories over the next few decades. And despite Dragon Ball now being done in any way possible, the popularity of Dragon Ball itself was growing larger than anyone could imagine nation and worldwide. Toriyama becoming a household name in Japan not only due to Dragon Ball, but also because he was asked to be the main concept artist for the Dragon Quest series, which quickly became a staple of Japanese culture still to this day, just like Dragon Ball. And who could forget Chrono Trigger, him creating the character designs of one of the most critically acclaimed RPGs of all time. His art and name itself extending far past Dragon Ball, and this Japanese mangaka becoming known worldwide in a casual sense, something that had really never happened before. And this, more than almost anything else, is what I think may be the most important part of Dragon Ball in a weird way. It's a thing that, even still to right now, no other manga or anime can say it shares with it. That being, having one of the world's largest and most vocal fan bases, like not even of just anime or manga. We're talking something that's as big as both Christianity to Americans and foot soccer to Europeans. So with all of this fan love and groundswell seemingly not stopping, Z's anime had finished, and Toei, potentially losing their biggest cash cow, was nervous. And almost immediately after Z ended, a new anime original story was greenlit. Toei slamming their deck of cards on the table and announcing Dragon Ball Grand Tour, or GT as it's known. A sequel to Z set 5 years after the 10-year time jump in the last chapter. And it obviously goes without saying that GT is something. On a normal day as Goku is doing his usual training with Oob, Pilaf is causing a ruckus once again all of these years later and has snuck into Kami's lookout, on the hunt for the Dragon Balls to make a wish and summoning Shenron. Except this isn't the usual Dragon Balls, and that's a different Shenron. The balls having black stars on them, and after Pilaf gets mad at Goku, he wishes for him to be a kid again. Ultimate Shenron granting this wish, fading out and the black star balls launching off like they would after a usual wish. Except this time, since Pilaf found these random different Dragon Balls that I guess were in this back room the whole time, it turns out they've been blasted across the galaxy, not just Earth. And if they aren't recovered and brought back within 1 year, the planet will fucking explode or some shit. Goofy's setup and a little contrived, sure, but not that bad so far. With the Earth in danger once again and Goku now a kid but with a similar power level, he gears up for a space adventure to track down the Black Star Balls, asking both Gohan and Goten to come with him. Meaning, are we gonna see a Goku family adventure for the actual first time? That could be really cool, that's a really good idea, and of course, that's not what happened. And due to some wacky mishaps, the ship launches off to space with Goku, Trunks, who would probably be about 23 now, and Pan, Gohan's 10-year-old daughter. The trio going on space-sized adventures to search for the Black Star Balls. And from here, as pretty much any Dragon Ball fan knows, GT largely missed the mark. It being the black sheep of the whole franchise, which is saying a lot because there's some goofy shit in this franchise. Like I said, the anime is totally original, meaning that it was created not by Toriyama, but by Toei staff itself. It's always debated online how deep the involvement was, but Toriyama absolutely did help with character designs and general plot planning. But overall for this anime, he was pretty hands-off. And we would see for the actual first time, not counting like movies, how Dragon Ball was without Toriyama. And now, like, it isn't all bad. I've always loved the adventure aspect to Dragon Ball, so the concept of big space adventures is really awesome to me. Tons of the planets and locations they go to have some amazing painted backgrounds with heavy SNES Final Fantasy vibes. There are some really great fights scattered throughout, like movie-level quality at times. And I don't care what anyone says, I will die loving Super Saiyan 4 Goku and also Gogeta. Like, this shit is so much cooler to me than either God or Blue. Come at me, bitch, I don't care. Also, I don't really hate the villains. Super 17, Baby, Dr. Mew, some of the Shadow Dragons, they're all pretty fine to me. And I've always really liked the lore bits involving the Tuffle race. I think they're a solid addition to Saiyan history. The problem is that even with these new villains, large-scale premise, and the time-skipped versions of the original cast, everything just feels so flat, bland, sterile, and a little uncanny. Dragon Ball has for sure been about fighting during most of its run, but the early adventure story roots help form a foundation for the cast, it building up these characters to grow into those hyper-fighting heroes we all came to love. Goku obviously being the biggest example of that. There's always been the long-standing joke that, haha, how will Goku power up and win the fight for everybody? And yeah, sure, in a lot of cases, that is how things have shaken out. But it's downright wrong to say that he doesn't get help tons of times, be it from Vegeta, Piccolo, Gohan, whoever. But with GT, Trunks himself has been so nerfed in power that Goku has to pick up his slack. And Pan, the granddaughter of Goku, is probably the most misused character in this entire wholly original anime. Her kind of just existing here in GT to yell at Goku or get kidnapped, which really let me down. The idea of a girl Saiyan was always something I wanted as a kid that we were totally denied. At least we got these two now, that's a good replacement. At any rate, there's already plenty of videos out there that deep dive into GT, its production and its story, its problems and its, well, mostly problems. But for my money, I don't hate GT. Hell, I don't even really dislike it. Sure, parts of it are boring. It largely doesn't compare to a single storyline from Dragon Ball in quality. But I still find some odd charm to it. It's like looking at an off-brand version of a thing I really like, some big fan fiction that does have cool ideas but ultimately doesn't understand what it's actually adapting itself from. Also, despite it seemingly doing pretty well here in America, Funimation choosing to just skip the first 16 episodes and jump right to the baby saga was probably a sign that it was never gonna catch on like Z before it. Ratings in Japan apparently being really not great and the series ending at 64 episodes, living on in a weird place of memory for most of Dragon Ball fans. But even with an anime that was overall weak and generally poorly received worldwide, that didn't diminish the hype around Dragon Ball at all. And in fact, even if GT wasn't for everyone, it ended up fueling the next era of Dragon Ball, the era of the fans. I've been chronically online for a large chunk of my life. I remember using the internet in the 90s when websites had actual sauce and were cool. And one of the biggest things about this era was forum posting. Nowadays, the obvious hub for this type of conversation is probably Reddit, but back then, man, the options were endless. Things like Usenet, Dragon Ball focused AOL chat rooms, The Black Goku, Kazinshu, Pojo. Like, there were so many wild theories and fan canons about the possible future of Dragon Ball after Z/GT. Scientists and scholars to this day are still trying to confirm if SSJ8 is real. And it was this energy, this dedication to a show that not seemed to be going away at all, it fueling the next so many years of Dragon Ball content. Whether it was in an official way, a fan creation, or the endless amounts of dumbass memes and decades old jokes. Be it over 9,000 or Gohan Blanco, the list keeps going. On the fan side, you have things like the Team 4-Star Abridged series. It literally creating whole ass careers for multiple people and still being so beloved to this day. You have the huge amount of fan animations, some serious, some silly, some even rivaling actual officially produced stuff made by Toei. You have the almost countless amount of references to Dragon Ball in cartoons, other anime, culture in general. This episode of Billy and Mandy is still imprinted in my head all of these years later. There's the Dojins, the fan art in the OCs. Look at this dumbass poster board I have. Someone I know literally just came to my house one day and said, "Take this," and it made me laugh so hard that I did. Personally, my favorite of these big Dragon Ball love letters is the multiple different videos produced by Mega64 over the last 12 years now? Starting with an officially commissioned by Funimation trailer for Battle of Gods that is just silly as hell, obviously. The ending scene of the man formerly known as Eric Badur falling from the sky dressed as Neo from the Matrix and saying,
Mr. Goku, I've been looking.
Still makes me almost cry laughing to this day. But past this really well produced joke video, their In 5 Minutes Sweeted series, a set of videos telling the Saiyan through Buu sagas in complete live action, notably with absolutely zero special effects, only practical props and camera tricks. Like, the way they pull off some of the most pivotal and iconic scenes is so crafty and smart. These videos are, in my opinion, the perfect love letter to what Dragon Ball is, both as the series itself and as a fanboy phenomenon. Speaking of fanboys, I've obviously always been a mark for Dragon Ball related media, be it card games, toys, clothes, whatever. But as a kid whose literal earliest memories I can remember were playing a demo of FF8 and also Doom on the Genesis, I've been a hashtag gamer since fucking birth, dude. Still to this day, and with it being one of my biggest forms of entertainment across my entire life, I've played almost every Dragon Ball game made from PS1 forward. So I have a pretty decent perspective on most of them. And like with the movies, here's a basic tier list rated 1 through 5 on both the scale of being a Dragon Ball game and a game itself to play and control. And only the ones I myself have had hands-on with, whether it was 30 hours or 30 minutes. Just like with the movies, I had a 4-page segment here where I reviewed each game that I had played individually. Here's the outline of it. But the video's already long enough, and I'm sure plenty of you just don't give a shit. So just assume 4 out of 5s and 5s are must plays, and 3 below is up to you. Don't take these ratings very seriously, they're largely vibe based. But as you can obviously tell from my opinions, it's a huge gambit of peaks peaks and valleys, but the hits slap so hard that it can really help make up for those weak ones. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this fan era before the 2013 return with Battle of Gods, a movie that was created by Toriyama to wipe the slate clean after the very well received and highly rated Dragon Ball Evolution, it almost killing the series name forever, is a thing that doesn't technically exist. It's not real. It's more like an idea of movement. And it all began with this image, this now legendary artwork of what people thought was an official version of Super Saiyan 5 Goku, a new logo for a Dragon Ball series titled AF being in the corner. Now, the real story here is this was drawn and submitted to a Spanish magazine by a man named David Montiel Franco, and it wasn't even supposed to be Goku or Super Saiyan 5, instead it was his OC named Tablos. But that didn't stop the internet, and this drawing was shared everywhere, saying it was official and the tagline Dragon Ball AF meaning after future, taking place somewhere after GT. Now, honestly, I kind of understand why this happened. For a Dragon Ball OC in the early 2000s that was being shared online, this is a really good fucking drawing. I saw it back as a kid and was like, oh my god, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And if you would have told me it was official, my dumbass might have believed you. And from here, this AF idea spread like wildfire. People online just making shit up, designing OCs and saying that all of it was official or it was leaked from Toriyama and coming soon to an anime, which of course was never true. But in this early era of the internet, most people had no idea how to get official info from Japan in the first place. So anything convincing and on a Dragon Ball related forum was usually good enough. This idea of Dragon Ball AF didn't just stop here though, and among the multiple fan dojins it had online using that same name, one specifically published by an artist named Toible is worth mentioning. Because after 5 volumes of his own Dragon Ball fan series, V-Jump, a monthly Jump side magazine, tapped him on the shoulder and asked if he wanted to work on an officially unofficial Dragon Ball manga. A side story that doesn't really fit anywhere in the timeline and was more to advertise a currently ongoing mobile gacha game, Dragon Ball Heroes, which is a weird beast of a series. Heroes has like multiple manga adaptations by multiple artists, as well as whole ass fully voiced officially produced anime OVAs that tell this insane fanfiction story. It involving the gods of time and parallel universes way more than before and what would come after officially. Like, the amount of weird lore and things that happen here would probably add like another hour onto this video, so just look that up yourself. I think Heroes is pretty fun. I've read some of the manga adaptations and watched parts of the anime on YouTube, and sure, yeah, it's got some stupid but cool stuff still in there, even if a lot of it does feel like absolute fanfic in both good and bad ways. So take that as you will. Most importantly though, the artist creating that first manga story to go with the game, it being titled Victory Mission, changed his pen name to Toyotaro, which, as you might know, is the guy who would go on to be handpicked by Toriyama himself to illustrate the newly coming Dragon Ball Super manga. Them working as a writer-artist duo to create the official fully canon continuation of one of the biggest manga/anime of all time. It drawn by someone that, while still being a fairly amateur artist, was without a doubt one of the world's biggest Dragon Ball fans. And from here, let's head into the final big chunk of this video, taking a look at Dragon Ball Super, both the anime and manga. So like I've already said, Battle of Gods was made to wipe the stain of evolution off the record and introduce two new characters, Whis and Beerus, while bringing fans back to the world of Dragon Ball, with the follow-up Resurrection of F being made shortly after that revived Frieza and was full of the classic Z combat. Them kind of being necessary companion pieces in my mind, with both of them introducing a new Super Saiyan form each. God Mode and Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan, or just Blue. And while both these new movies were pretty fun, the real news was obviously that Dragon Ball Super exists. And for the first time in over 20 years, fans were going to get more legit official Toriyama canon Goku adventures. The manga starting in June of 2015 and the anime a few weeks later in July. With, as I'm sure a lot of you already know, the early episodes and chapters are both versions that were, unfortunately, pretty bad recaps of the previous two movies, but also remixed, so not exactly though. And while they both did adapt Battle of Gods in a worse manner, the anime continued through with the Frieza story, while the manga skipped ahead to the actual first brand new arc, the tournament against Universe 6. The anime catching up shortly after and both starting the Goku Black arc side by side, before the weekly pace of the anime would move past the monthly release of the manga. And from here, the stories would start to differ from each other in pretty significant ways, the manga itself continuing far past the ending of Super. And with that, how do these new arcs stack up to the original Dragon Ball series, both OG and Z, both in anime and manga? Well, it's the definition of a mixed bag. The Super anime, famously or infamously, had a rough start. Already being considered a pointless adaptation of the much better movies, the animation and just general quality of the artwork mid-frame was like extreme levels of bad, and that would go on for like 30 more episodes. Just recapping movies with some kind of boring anime-only filler that did not have that same charm as Z's. Copy Vegeta does nothing for me. The first real big new addition in Super that would go on to affect the lore of Dragon Ball going forward would have to be the full introduction of the 12 universes. 12 other realities all led by their own gods, and of course, having their own warriors like Goku and crew to fight. Them being led by the king of all realities, Zeno. This cute-ass little dude here who could wipe away all existence if he got bored. Really hope he stays the strongest being in the series forever. It's very funny to me that in-game Dragon Ball does some true Toriyama shit and makes the universe's strongest thing just a little guy who's got the mindset of a 7-year-old. With this said, and not counting the recap episodes or small comedy arcs, Super has 3 major stories in its anime. The Universe 6 arc, the Goku Black Saga, and the Universal Survival Tournament. The first basically just being small-scale one-on-one battles that serves to introduce the concept of other universes. Goku Black's being a time-traveling god self fighting parallel world-hopping Future Trunks return arc, except he unfortunately has lost all of his sauce. And lastly, the all-out battle royale against 8 of the 12 universes. The teams made up of 10 warriors each, so 80 total, and the losers getting their entire universe wiped from existence. Overall, I think each of these 3 arcs have major aspects I both really like, but also don't give a shit about. The Universe 6 tournament has some cool fights, and I love the shit out of Hit. But Cabba and Frost don't really do anything for me, and that's less to even say about these guys. Goku Black's arc is almost a parody of the extremely complicated storytelling from the Cell Saga, time travel and parallel worlds being the main focus as they take on a corrupted Kai and an evil body-swapped Goku. which I actually really like. Future Trunks has always been the best, and even if his redesign has sucked ass for years now, I still have a soft spot for his storylines. That's not to even talk about the games and extended Dragon Ball media doing wild shit with him non-stop. All this new lore coming into full center stage with the Tournament of Power. The earlier mentioned Battle Royale that I have some mixed thoughts on. The now famous arc where Goku achieves his new big final form, Ultra Instinct, taking on the muscle-headed brick wall himself, Jiren. The Tournament of Power is both a really great idea with some dope moments, but it also, at least to me, showcases some of the weakest parts of animated Dragon Ball. Like I had said earlier, both Ball and largely Z understood what made reading the later big fighting arc so fun, and that while it wasn't always logical for the animators to adapt it punch for punch because more time needed filling, that obvious filler time was still just fun to look at. It still had a radiance of style and feeling that carried dull moments way further. And maybe it's just me, but I feel like Super lacks that same understanding. This is not to say that all of the animation is bad, or that I'm someone who's upset that we've moved on to digital cel-painted animation over traditional hand-drawn on-paper style. Nah, that ain't it. It's something more uncanny. Like, I see these still shots of the cast just standing around talking or powering up, and these energy waves, the feeling of growing power and like the world itself is rumbling apart from explosive ki, is just not in most any of these scenes. And sure, this isn't representative of every single one, but old things like the dirt flying around, the wind whipping through characters, just those small little touches don't seem to be there. The little things that made Dragon Ball Z cool. Also, as a forever Gohan stan and huge TN fan, Super is straight up suffering. Gohan's storyline from fighter to scholar father is not my issue, regardless how you feel about it, I don't care. It's more the fact that every single frame of him on screen has me audibly saying, God, why does he look like shit? Almost episode to episode where someone is just standing around for 6+ seconds straight and it looks ugly. And the less we say about how this anime treated Tien, the better. Now, looking back to the tournament itself as an arc, meh? For every moment I said, ooh, that was pretty fun, there's another where I half wanted to pick my phone up or go make some food because, yup, it's been 2 to 3 minutes straight of fighting with the most boring enemies I've seen in Dragon Ball yet. While every single character from every single team on the bench has a comment to make, which isn't even unique to Super, Z did this too. But since almost no one in the TOP has that same energy as either a Z villain or even an OG Dragon Ball dipshit, I just can't even fake being entertained. Looking at the teams overall, I think Toppo, the Saiyan Soul Sister duo, Hit and Dispo are the only ones who as characters interest me at all. Jiren is fun as a concept, his design cracks me up, bro is just a buff-ass gray alien, but as a character, I got nothing. He hits really hard, but I'm not gonna sit here and lie, his final match with Goku is some of the best Dragon Ball content in years. Like, this is a good-ass fight that actually understands the point of a battle royale. Everyone's flying in to punch Jiren and he's just going. A fight so good that it famously got Mexico in trouble. The country itself just broadcasting the final match for free in bars, stadiums, fucking street corners, with the government getting a C and D from the nation of Japan itself. You cannot lie, no one's got love for Dragon Ball like Mexico. Not even close. Regardless of how you or I feel about these three arcs, The main thing about Super that is most important to remember, possibly more so than any other part, is that this is not Dragon Ball Z. Super, despite having a manga running alongside it, is a project overall made and developed by writers at Toei, largely with no original reference point for them to work from. And for the parts of the story that are directly overseen by Toriyama himself, it's easy to see that this is the result of his development as both an artist and a person since the ending of Dragon Ball. That writing style he was known for having changed a lot over these last 20 years. Sure, Super is still packed with over-the-top fights, new transformations, and hyper beam blasts, but Goku, and largely the cast in general, have very much had personality updates. A lot of Tori's early goofier writing traits coming back, and in turn, making the cast and the situations they get involved with much more lighthearted than they were in Z. Vegeta, going from the violent Saiyan prince to reluctant goofy father who does silly dances to distract powerful gods and is a total wife guy. Gohan is now a scholar like he always wanted and barely even fights anymore, let alone trains, choosing to focus on his home life. Krillin, still married to 18 and with a kid, is a cop now. And Goku, despite him always being that happy-go-lucky person even when Z was at its most action-packed, has totally evolved to be a half-and-half mix of both Kid and Z Goku. His level of intelligence dropping through the floor and becoming a semi-mindless combat machine, either locked in on training, eating, or farming turnips to make some cash for Chi-Chi. Personally, I do like Super Goku. He's so simple-minded now that it's wrapped back around to being endearing and fun, just like those early days. And overall, I think it's a pretty good update. I will say, I've never agreed with the Goku is a bad dad allegations, mainly because there's levels to being a bad dad. Sure, he's been pretty absent for large chunks of his marriage and kids' lives, but he still loves them and is in no way like avoiding them. He isn't emotionally abusive or anything like that. He's just doing his thing because that's who he is. Something that Chi-Chi more than accepted at the start of their relationship, and Gohan understands because in his own way, he's a Saiyan warrior as well, even if Goku's methods aren't always the smartest. Super is where some of those allegations hit harder. Things like him telling Vegeta he doesn't need to be there when his daughter is about to be born. Him saying, quote, "Vegeta, you're not having it. Hell, I wasn't even around for my kids' births," with no remorse. And then way later down the line when Gohan mentions going to pick Pan up from school, Goku's granddaughter, he responds with, "Who?" So not only has he become a questionable dad, bro ain't even doing the grandpa thing. Piccolo once again picking up the slack and becoming the dad who stepped up. Also, even though Goku has 2 kids, he says he doesn't know what a kiss is. There's that. I think about this all of the time. What do you mean you have kids and have never kissed Chi-Chi? What? My actual biggest issue with Super, both here and in the manga, isn't even anything animation or character related. It's more so that I feel like we were introduced to these universes and characters only to immediately slam them all together, making 3/4 of them feel like jobbers who don't even seem that well thought out, with the manga barely doing anything else with the idea of these universes past this point. It really makes me look at this entire universe thing as a concept and go, well, I wish that was better. Oh, and the Ultra Instinct theme whips ass. Big who's playing that music from SpongeBob energy. That's perfect meme material. Of course, this is just the animated version of Super, and running alongside with it over in V-Jump was the manga adaptation. The story here being slightly different from the start already, but after the Tournament of Power, going down its own road that, personally, I think is very good. Like I mentioned, the manga version of Super had been slightly different from Chapter 1. Both it and the anime telling largely the same story, but with the manga removing most of the one-off episodes and reworking parts of each arc. The pacing being 3 times as fast and blasting through Battle of Gods, skipping Resurrection of F, wrapping up the Universe 6 tournament in like 4 chapters and getting straight to Goku Black within 2 volumes total, versus 40-ish episodes of the show. Obviously, I'd rather neither of these versions adapt already really well made stuff like these movies, so if I have to pick one of these two from here, I'm going manga. And now, going into a version of the Goku Black arc that is largely similar to the anime, but with slight differences here and there, but still following all of the big plot beats and ending with the same general layout. Xeno coming in and wiping out that future, and Goku eventually getting that Xeno to become friends with current time Xeno. See, this is the type of stuff I really like and wish Super did more of, but whatever. The thing most worth mentioning about here in this arc of the manga is that Toyotaro's art was getting steadily stronger. Going back to both his AF Dojin and Hero's Victory mission, his drawing has always been strong, even if it is for sure a style built heavily from Toriyama's framework. And going into Super, it being an official sequel to Dragon Ball, the pressure was on and eyes are going to be very analytical. And I think everything pre-Goku Black isn't at all bad, but it's largely just fine at best. Toyotaro can for sure draw fight scenes and character focus shots that have the vibe of Dragon Ball. But it's a vibe that largely lacks the same charm as Toriyama's at first. Thankfully, it's with Goku Black where his fights, his facial expressions, and use of scale in the attacks really starts to amp up and refine itself. Some of the battle scenes in the future with Rose Black Goku being fantastic and catching me reading it off guard. This is something that Toyo would not only continue to grow with into the next arc, the Tournament of Power, but in my opinion, created a version that was overall much more enjoyable than the anime. The Tournament of Power is supposed to be a battle royale, a 48-minute showdown between 8 universes, 80 total warriors. Now in the anime, like I said a bit earlier, the pacing here gets really rough at times, spending plenty of the tournament's episodes showing 1v1s or 3v1s over and over, and it never really feels like a battle royale. Instead, it's more like a long succession of battles leading one-on-one into the next. I feel like you see almost all 80 of the fighters individually fight and individually fall out of the ring, and man, that is really not necessary when a lot of them kinda suck. Now on the flip side, over in the manga, bro, this is what I wanted. The tournament here feeling like a real battle royale. Fights between all kinds of people bleeding into each other. Contestants swapping targets mid-combo and it having an overall totally chaotic feeling. Like a, battle royale should. I don't need to see methodical, long-paced fights against people who are built to lose. Let's just do what we know is gonna happen with quick style and blast some ass. And then the actual big matches can go down. And when it comes to those matches themselves, I feel like it's kind of 50-50 on if I prefer them in the manga or not. Now when the Super anime is firing full force, the animation and overall impact of the attacks can be phenomenal. I don't want to undersell the great moments. Goku's Kamehameha Surf Blast is still one of the hardest things he's ever done as a character. But over here in the manga, you have Gohan versus Kefla. And I know people might like what he does in the anime here, but to me, this felt like it was the first time my dude was getting an actual legit cool moment since like 1994. with the best part being about it that for once, it's not Goku doing it, which makes his building confrontation with Jiren feel much more impactful and earned. In the anime, Goku fights so much in this tournament that he spends almost just as many episodes trying to recover energy as he does in actual combat, all within this less than 50-minute time limit. And I know you can say, well, Dragon Ball's anime has always been kind of a meme about time, think about Namek. And yeah, you're not wrong, but Goku fought one guy during that time limit. And this really ended up devaluing some of his fights for me, where the manga uses that time instead to let the others really shine so Goku's eventual big battle hits harder. My personal favorite moment of this whole arc not even being in the anime, Master Roshi having to become the Turtle Hermit Sensei once again and remind Goku that there's more to fighting than just rage or strength, and that if he wants to hit his next level, he has to reevaluate himself, the way he fights. Roshi jumping in against Jiren and popping off with Pseudo Ultra Instinct. Him dodging Jiren's attacks and keeping up with his level to literally everyone's surprise. Before, of course, Jiren beefs himself up and knocks him out. From here, things play out fairly similar to the anime, and I like the conclusion of the tournament in both versions. But the biggest key difference to me here is that Goku hits his next level with help from his master, with introspection and self-understanding. And where he spent the last so many years yelling harder to get stronger, this feels like a logical and well thought out next step, opening up a whole new road of evolution for Goku. And in the anime, he gets hit by his own spirit bomb and it's so big that it powers him up somehow. Sure, bud, okay. I wouldn't even complain so much about that if I didn't have something literally much better to compare it to. Anyway, with the tournament wrapped up here the same as the anime, the weekly release of Super had actually ended, the show being over while the manga was about to take its next steps forward into uncharted territory. At this point in time around 2018, the Super Broly movie was out and also a 10 out of 10. But despite the manga referencing both the movie's events and Broly himself, Toriyama and Toyotaro decided to instead begin a brand new arc, the Galactic Patrol Prisoner Saga. This being the Galactic Patrol that Jocko is a member of, the same Jocko from Toriyama's 10-chapter single-volume story he did in 2014. Really like this book, by the way, definitely recommend it, good shit. The group coming to Earth and the badass agent Maris kidnapping an in hibernation Majin Buu, as well as both Vegeta and Goku, taking them off into space and revealing the next big story of the series. 10 million years ago, an evil, life-stealing wizard named Moro terrorized the galaxy, absorbing and eating the energy of entire planets to power himself, eventually being defeated and sealed away by the Grand Supreme Kai, the Kai who 5 million years after this was absorbed by Kid Buu, them merging together and creating Fat Buu before he was sealed away as well. And now, all of these years later, literally 10 million, Moro has broken free once again. Him being a husk of his former self, a withered old goat who's lost most of his power and is on a quest to get it back. Using, what else? The Dragon Balls. Him heading to Namek and the Galactic Patrol asking for the help of our Saiyan duo and also Buu himself, knowing that sleeping somewhere inside of him, the Grand Supreme Kai could still be there. Now, I just want to say up front here, this arc idea right from the start had me hooked. Space shit in this weird and wild universe had always felt unexplored in the actual main manga for how much of it revolved around aliens. And even though GT tried to have that space adventure, It was all of these years later with this arc that we finally are getting some new good space content. Something that would continue past this, as I'll mention soon. Now, this fun adventure aspect aside, how does that play out? What is Moro like as a villain? And with the Tournament of Power having given Goku his new Ultra Instinct form, where do him and Vegeta go from here? The manga now basically becoming a duo buddy cop series about these two Saiyan dipshits? And the answer for them to progress was, surprisingly, introspection. Moro, like most Dragon Ball enemies, is really strong and really evil. But unlike most of those same enemies, his power was specifically to eat energy. Meaning that if Goku, Vegeta, or anybody should use their killer moves, bro could just swallow it, powering up and becoming a more deadly fighter than he was 7 seconds ago. So for the first time, their usual techniques have no effect, they have no counter, and overall, they just cannot handle Moro. The Goatman getting his power back, busting some lackeys out of prison and heading out for galactic domination, leaving both Vegeta and Goku beaten, them having to go on their own separate paths to develop, finding that unique thing that can make both of them stronger in their own ways. And it's with this where I think Super really begins to shine. Since Moro's powers are too weird and magical for the duo to handle, Goku noticing that the Galactic Patrol agent Miras seems to be hiding immense strength, goes off on his own to train and, hopefully with his help, learn to truly master Ultra Instinct. Goku realizing that even if he did pop it off against Jiren in the perfected form, his silver hair design, he can't really do it at will, and using the lesser version called Sign still uses too much energy since he has no real control of it. And while these two work on Goku's internal balance, Vegeta takes a trip to planet Yardrat, the kinda legendary planet where Goku ended up after Namek exploded, him learning the signature instant transmission move and never bringing this place up again. Vegeta himself wanting to learn some of these unique and mystical moves that Goku did all those years ago, which by all means is a type of training that totally goes against Vegeta's arrogant and prideful ways, focusing much more on balancing the energy inside yourself and controlling its flow than just punching harder. Earlier I talked about Majin Vegeta and how I wish the ideas of his growth from and then falling back into the evil Saiyan ways got more time to flesh itself out. And now, all this time later in Super, we've been slowly getting bits of that redemption, his personality obviously being way softer than it was in Z. And now, with Moro having invaded Namek and attacking its people, he can't help but see the monster in himself that he used to be, the tragedy that he caused these people happening again to them. With Vegeta now wanting to take a stand and save this planet, the Namekians themselves, very obviously wanting to atone for the things he did. And man, I've waited so long for something like this. Shout out both Tori and Toyo for finally letting the big-headed ass prince get the spotlight he's deserved, something they keep on doing past this as well. Now, with the two building up their own powers while Moro himself gets stronger, this all hits its climax with a massive blowout battle taking place on Earth. The Z Warriors all jumping in and fighting Moro's army of prison escapees. And even if it's just some small scale fan service, seeing characters like Yamcha and Tien do literally anything at all makes me smile. This all leads back to Moro himself, the evil goat lord of space, the devourer of life. And how is he as a main villain? For my money, I say he's a bit of a mixed bag. I think his power as a concept is great. Someone who regular Z fighting doesn't work on and requires a different level of technique to fight against. bro's got magic like Bobbity did. And his early design is really good in my opinion, just an old ass goat who slowly starts to stand up straighter as he absorbs energy and becomes more of a threat. Unfortunately, full power Moro after he absorbs the power of copycat character 7-3 is kinda as a design. Him losing that nice uniqueness and just becoming another Cell type. Now, I won't spoil the conclusion to this arc because I know a large chunk of Dragon Ball fans probably haven't read Super, but I really do feel like overall, the Moro arc is the strongest story yet in this whole return. It even finds a way to bring back fucking Oob, even if only for a second, and that's such a tease, man. I'm the one guy in the world who wants more Oob. With the defeat of Moro and the Galactic Patrol restoring peace to the galaxy, the next arc begins right away, the Granola Survivor Saga, with the appropriately named Granola, an eye patch wearing flowing green haired warrior who seems to have a grudge against the Saiyans, on his way to meet up with a group of gangster planet brokers, the Heater Gang. And from here, our Saiyan duo are swept up once again in the never-ending drama of the Saiyan race. Goku learning about his past and father, while Vegeta continues down his road of redemption. This time not just for him as Vegeta, but more so as the Prince of Saiyans. And where this arc is even lesser known than the Moro one, I'm going to try and spoil the least amount of things I can. Years ago, before the start of the story, planet Cereal was invaded by the Saiyans on Frieza's order, the mercenary race wiping out its native people, the Cerealians, and the Heater Gang showing up shortly after to capture and then sell off the planet, with the green-haired Granola being the sole survivor of the attack. Him carrying an immense hatred for both the Saiyans and Frieza himself, the ones that stole his planet, his people, and his mother. Him gathering the Dragon Balls of this planet because apparently as long as you got a Namekian, you got the balls, one will do. Wishing to trade all but 3 years of his life for an ultimate strength, a bottomless power, all to get that years-long building revenge. And thanks to the Heater Gang and their ulterior motives, they've convinced Goku and Vegeta to come to planet Cereal on a job, the two being ambushed by Granola and starting a huge grudge match. Now I'm gonna jump ahead a bit because honestly, this arc is kind of just non-stop fighting. But to mention the Heater Gang for a second, I think they're pretty lame as big arc villains. I don't have a problem so much with them being like weak and not really a threat, minus Gas of course, as we'll talk about in a second. It's more so just overall, I don't feel like these other three have any real character to them. I don't hate their designs, but I also don't love them either. I don't know, I just don't really feel anything towards the Heaters at all. The one named Gas wishing with the Dragon Balls to be powerful like Granola. And I guess that's a good enough excuse for a villain to appear. But I don't know, I just don't think this design is anything special, him as a character is nothing special. Literally the Heaters are the definition of nothing special. But the thing that is really interesting about this arc is we finally get the manga official introduction of Bardock that was more than just a small side panel. Him being one of those invading Saiyans on planet Cereal, but going against both his Saiyan instincts and orders, ended up saving a small boy from the attack, the boy who would grow up to be Granola. Goku learning this and, for the very first time, remembering his Saiyan memories, remembering the escape pod, remembering the faces of his parents, now finding his dad's scouter, the only thing that still exists of Bardock, and taking it with him. Which whips ass to me, man. Like, yeah, it's nothing massive or anything, but it just feels like it completes some long-running character arc of Goku's. moves. Like, all these years later, after confronting his Saiyan heritage time and time again, it almost seems like with this, he can kind of make peace with those conflicting emotions between Saiyan and Earthling, which is some really good shit in my opinion. And, even if it is all the way here in Super, Bardock finally has an official manga storyline. Him, of course, getting that dope-ass movie where he takes on Frieza in a futile attempt to save his planet. And of course a few one-shots here and there, and the 20-minute OVA where it reveals that instead of dying from Frieza's big blast, he went back in time and ran into Frieza's like great-great-great-grandpa or some shit named Chilled, and got so mad from just looking at him that Bardock became the Super Saiyan from the legends their race had. Sure, whatever, I guess. And one of the biggest things about this arc, the actual fighting feels like Toyotaro has hit his total stride. Goku versus Gas being so fun to read. Gas creating trains out of nowhere to slam into Goku, jumping on top and having a train car rooftop battle, and then another train slamming into him on top of that one. Before then, Goku instant transmissions to a different planet, Gas copying that ability and following him, and Goku does it again, and Gas follows, and again, going until they're light years away from the starting point. Goku then chain transmissioning all the way back to Earth, leaving Gas in the middle of nowhere. And with his use of transmission not being as accurate since he just stole it from Goku, he's gotta fly the whole way back, taking like 30 minutes and letting the gang regroup. And no shit, this might be one of my most favorite moves in the whole franchise. When I was reading this just a few months ago, I was screaming. It's both fun and smart as hell. 10 out of 10, they fucking nailed it. And of course, we can't forget Vegeta's big ego mode. Him coming to the conclusion that Ultra Instinct, a style made by the angels that Goku has been learning, just isn't for him. And instead, his power is more on the level of something like Beerus, a god of destruction. Vegeta learning to use his energy in a new way to literally absorb damage. Not in a way that heals him, but powers him up. Like the thrill of a battle, the violence and desperation makes him stronger on some pure-blooded Saiyan shit. His hair turning purple and losing his eyebrows. Even if it does look a little silly, I'm super glad Vegeta got his own thing other than just Ultra Instinct. He really deserves that. The arc ending in a shockwave that made the internet kind of crack up. That being the dude himself, Frieza, just swoops in, saying, "Oh yeah, I found a time chamber somewhere and trained for like 10 years worth of hours," turning into his new form, Black Frieza, which is a choice. Him killing the Heater Gang with ease and smacking the shit out of both Goku and Vegeta. Flying off and possibly setting Frieza to be a straight up villain once again, which regardless of how you feel about a new Frieza form, you gotta admit, it's pretty funny. The story jumping ahead again a few more years and taking place right around where Dragon Ball Superhero happens. The next manga arc being another pseudo-adaptation of a movie, just like those earlier volumes with Battle of Gods. Except here, actually adding things in to feel like it's worth the read. Superhero is the story of yet another return from the Red Ribbon Army. Literally how many times they gotta teach you this lesson, old man. Them secretly developing a giant as hell, strong as shit version of Cell and kidnapping Pan, Gohan's now like 3 to 4 year old daughter, with him and Piccolo busting in to save her and them fighting against Cell Max. Both getting new forms, Gohan's Beast Mode and Orange Piccolo, beating the bad guy and saving the day. Pretty standard overall for a Dragon Ball movie. But as a Gohan stan, I really like this one. But here in the manga, there is an entire extended prologue, taking the time instead to see Goten and Trunks, who were now in high school, the two wearing Saiyaman costumes and fighting crime around the city, hiding their power levels and living undercover like Gohan did in the Buu saga. Toyotaro says at the start of volume 21 that he always wanted more of this with Gohan those years ago. Fucking me too. And being someone who loves these two dipshits, I adore this little intro to the superhero movie part of the story, with the later manga adaptation of superhero itself being totally fine. Beast Mode Gohan's big ass hair and Piccolo's new form just being "I'm orange now" are both still goofy as hell, but whatever, I've come to expect that by this point in Dragon Ball. Also, Grandpa Piccolo is one of the best things to ever come out of this franchise. The way he legit obviously cares about Pan is so good. Now at this point in time, as I'm sure many of you know, Dragon Ball Super is currently on hiatus, with no one knowing when it could possibly make its return. And I know it goes without saying, but earlier this year on March 1st, 2024, Toriyama passed away from a blood clot in his brain. And it's no exaggeration to say that his death rocked the world. I've talked plenty in this video about the fans, the love, and the legend that was Dragon Ball. How it changed my life, the lives of so many people. And waking up to that news and just seeing these articles and posts on Twitter was like a shot to the gut. But as the day and week went on, the thing that really hammered his passing down harder and made that impact continue to blow a bigger crater in my chest was the unified worldwide outpouring of love sent his way. Like I've said, Dragon Ball went global due to its anime. It didn't matter where you lived, if you were cool or a nerd, race, gender, whatever. Goku was Goku. He was everybody's friend, the star in the sky for so many of us to look up to. And knowing that the guy that made that beacon for us was just so randomly gone, and the whole world itself stopping to really and truly acknowledge what Toriyama did for them, was a type of heartwarming I wasn't expecting to come out of this situation. In the last few chapters of Super before his passing in the current hiatus, Goku comes home for the first time in a while, meeting up with Gohan and Goten, as well as Vegeta with Trunks. The group all sparring together and showing off what they can do. A bunch of little family matches, basically. Them going back home afterward to pick up Pan from school as a family along with Piccolo, since he is the godfather / uncle. These pages themselves actually just being wordless, but Pan seeing Goku popping behind him with a swift kick for her to say hi like a true-ass Saiyan, and then the Big Z family flying off together. Piccolo, Toriyama's admitted favorite character, waving bye to Pan's teacher who's framed as the reader themselves, that specifically being the final revision made by Toriyama. Super stopping here for now, and man, you couldn't really ask for a more perfect send-off, both for Super if the hiatus should last forever, and for Toriyama to his fans. His legacy at the end of the day, much more than the fighting and the big powers, is this family of characters we grew up with, that we love, that changed the world. Dragon Ball will honestly probably live on forever one way or another, and knowing that this series, after affecting the lives of so many people, will continue to be passed down and likely do the same for whole new generations over time, puts a really somber smile on my face. Goku is generational, and here's hoping that I get to live a long life that sees him in it forever, one way or another. So, the last two things I want to mention here are both Dragon Ball Daima and how you can read / watch all of the series in the current era. Now with Daima, this is technically, at least as far as we know for now, the final Dragon Ball content that Toriyama officially worked on. Him already having being described as deeply involved beyond his usual capacity. And based on what we've seen already, I think he was doing much more than just overseeing things like he probably did with Super's anime. At the time of this recording, Daima is at 6 total episodes, with no exact confirmation on how many total it will be. The story itself taking place after the Buu saga, but before Battle of Gods and therefore Super. The new king of the demon realm, Goma, him taking control after the death of Dabura, has snuck onto Earth, used the Dragon Balls to make Goku and the crew kids again, kidnapped Dende so they can't fix themselves using the balls, and retreated back to the demon realm. A mysterious resident of that realm named Glorio approaching both Goku and a youngified Supreme Kai to ask for their help in taking down Goma and by extension, saving Dende. The trio heading into the demon realm and beginning a brand new Dragon Ball adventure. So far with these 6 episodes, I'm loving Daima so much. I've never been one to mind excuses to have Kid Goku. That didn't bother me in GT at all. And where it has so much of the early Dragon Ball energy due to both the cast being kids and the plot itself being a journey in an unfamiliar land, bro, I'm in, I'm here, every episode on release, I got it on, I can't wait to see where this goes. And where Super had bursts of good animation with long stretches of rough patches, a chunk of it being made during the Dressrosa era of One Piece, which is fucking god-awful, Daima so far has been modern Toei, the Egghead arc Toei, meaning each scene is beauty in motion. And seeing a little old Goku whip dudes around using the power pole with fun hand-to-hand combat, it's so good, I love it. Fingers crossed it keeps this quality. And lastly, how should you experience Dragon Ball in 2024, but in America at least? First up with the manga, you have a few options. One is the Dragon Boxes, 2 separate box sets that have both the 16 volumes of Dragon Ball and the other 26 making up the rest of Z. They go on really decent sale all of the time. But on the other hand, this translation for sure feels pretty dated. And while not really being bad, there's other Jump manga who get it way worse, and it's a slam dunk compared to the Funimation dub script changes. It could honestly just use a passover and an update, which when you consider it's Dragon Ball, a forever selling series, these printings in my box set literally being like the 25th plus, I'm sure some point in these last 20 years, it could have been done. And another good reason it might also be worth that small update is so Viz can remove the original translator's name completely for it, because, fun fact, Gerard Jones got busted with over 600 images and videos of some no good content, so fuck it, let's get his name out of there. Lastly, the ending pages were updated in the Japanese Kazenban release, and Viz has never added them in, while also just randomly missing some of the chapter cover pages, and that's dumb. But aside from these single volumes, you also have 3-in-1 paperback releases, and a larger VizBig release. Mostly the same translations between them, but minor changes in censorship here and there. The channel Anime Collective has a really great deep dive on every version of Viz's Dragon Ball releases, even the fucking comic singles from back in the day. So definitely check that out if you want a more in-depth comparison. Lastly, Z has received a few volumes of the full color release covering the Saiyan through Frieza sagas, before seemingly stopping there with no plans to print the rest, I guess. Rumors there's some rights issues or something, but I don't know. For the people who might not be informed of this, Shonen Jump a lot of times has full color releases of their biggest series. Dragon Ball, Bleach, Naruto, One Piece, these are all made officially by Jump. And Dragon Ball is, I think, the only series that Viz has ever attempted a Western release of with these color scans. So if that's something you're interested in, give them a shot. Anime-wise, it's a whole thing. Obviously streaming online, you have Dragon Ball, Z, Kai, GT, and now of course Super and Daima, but they're kind of excluded in this, and can all be watched fairly easily. They have VHS releases, DVDs, Blu-rays, box sets, and deluxe editions. You name it, Dragon Ball's got the works. The thing is, there's no release that fans really consider to be a perfect set. Some versions have fucked up aspect ratios, some have messed up coloring, some of the restoration transfers had bad budgets and barely got any time to get the job done. And the Kai version of the Buu saga is a whole conversation and issue on its own. And these are all known issues that, despite being loudly talked about for years by tons of fans, it seems like there's been no real efforts to fix this officially and make them easy to access. Now I say officially because, of course, Dragon Ball fans have taken the initiative themselves and done their own remastering, so if you'd rather save the cash, you can do your own thing online however you want. I guess with this last thing to say, it's that without Dragon Ball, I wouldn't be who I am today. And even more so, the entire world itself. I probably wouldn't have such a deep love for anime and manga. I likely would have had a much harder time coping with my childhood. I wouldn't have found and experienced and shared so much joy, both from this series and the endless things it went on to influence. No matter what, be it 2004, 2024, or 3804, Goku is timeless. And I'm just really glad I can spread that love I have to others with this video, and that no matter what, Dragon Ball will always be there. The world forever giving both Goku and Toriyama their energy. Thanks for watching, hit the ship below and peep the Patreon. God, this video was long. This is probably also technically the December/Christmas drop because here in a few weeks, I'm going to Japan until January. Comment below and tell me some shit to do, I'm down for whatever. So until then, happy holidays and have a dope ass new year. See ya in 2025.